Hey everyone, I'm Brian Austin Green.
I'm Sharna Burgess.
And I'm Randy Spelling.
And you are listening to Oldish, an iHeartRadio podcast. Hello, and welcome once again to another episode of Oldish. I am Brian Austin Green.
I'm Sharna Burgess.
And I'm Randy Spelling.
So far, the reactions to these episodes have been phenomenal. People have been really thanking us for the help that we're trying to provide and responding well to it, and leaving us incredible questions and comments and episode ideas. So that part of it has been absolutely amazing.
Thank you everyone for interacting with us. That was why we wanted to do this, so we can interact with you guys. And I think that is so amazing. And I've been really loving doing this. I am doing it from Cabo this week.
Yeah, you're in Mexico.
Yes, you are.
I am in Mexico, living my best life on a girls' trip.
People will recognize this background. Yeah. This is the one that Sharna and I normally have behind us. I am now solo on the camera, which I'm fine. I can do this. Baby.
Brian, you're holding it down.
I almost didn't come. Brian had to convince
Barely.
me because Zane got hand, foot, and mouth last week. And it's just awful, but he's such a champ and he's doing really good. He's pretty much through it now. But I was almost going to back out of coming because of that, like, mom guilt, and I don't want to leave. But Bri was so amazing in saying, how much I need this and it'll be good, and that he's got it and Zane's okay. And of course I trust that. And I'm really grateful that I came. But I'm going to miss sitting next to you, baby, while we do this.
Well, here we are. It's only 1 week. It's one week, and then we'll be back to the norm. And I'll set up the craziness of podcast equipment here in our living room, and I'm sure I'll get it wrong.
Hey, listen, we're always learning and growing. Yeah, we're always learning and growing over here.
Thank you for awkwardly fumbling through this with us.
Yes, exactly.
Sharna, I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering, I saw that you left and I sent you a little message. I was wondering how hard it was to actually leave, because that's the whole thing with self-care and doing something for self. When you have kids, when you have a family, when you have a partner, it's hard sometimes to go, okay, I'm still going to go. Is everything okay? How was that for you?
It's a new experience for me to feel the mom guilt, parent guilt. I don't think it's just specific to moms, about leaving all your people, and because life, and whether they're sick or not, you're just so a part of life and schedule and things, and I don't want to miss out on anything. And I don't know, you just feel like you have so much weight and responsibility there, you forget that other people can pick that up for you, and everything will be okay. And I feel really supported in that. But it was really hard the night before, especially with Zane not being well.
I think there was a bit of like mom guilt for you too, because it's one of the first times really that you've gone away without Zane. And I know for you, it's the missing of the routine and the morning get
all
up,
of the
and
things,
the breakfast, and and then the kids coming home from school, and she was
all of that, doing homework with them. I know they have school projects this week that I'm involved with, and I'm like sending texts like, make sure that this gets sent in this week to school. Like the freak out that things aren't going to happen. They're going to happen. Like the world will revolve without me being there, but you definitely stress about it. So, but it was hard, Randy, to answer your question. And it was also interesting to observe this new set of feelings that I've never had surrounding a trip. I used to just get up and go somewhere on a whim, you know what I mean? And never ever felt guilt or stress about leaving. I would either just take Duke and Daisy with me, or we would figure it out, or with traveling with Brian, the kids, we all go together. So this was a first time experience for me of like, it's not for work. Like this is just purely for enjoyment and self-care and fun with a group of great girls. Is this okay? Is this really okay? But I feel great that I'm here, and that I was encouraged truly by Bri to come. I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, Brian, you're good like that. I could imagine, I don't know this, but I imagine that you're not the type of partner to make someone feel guilty when they're going to go do something for self. You're pretty encouraging.
God, no. Yeah.
I try and be as encouraging as possible, but with Sharna especially, I'll go out of town sometimes for 2.5, 3 weeks working, and she will stay home and hold down the fort. So it's like, okay, I knew that this trip was a huge opportunity for her to get away and recharge a little bit and have her own time. And and meditate and do the things that she truly loves to do that make her feel whole. So then she could come back here and be the best version of herself that she could possibly be. So
it's really cool.
You better get those meditations in, Sharna.
Exactly.
Hey, I was about to this morning, but I had a friend that was here. She was here for all of 24 hours, and she actually experienced the loss of her dog yesterday. It's so, is the word crazy, the coincidence of the fact that I've been helping my friend deal with her grief and her grieving, her very raw right now grieving of the loss of her beloved pet, whilst we have been planning to talk about grief this week on the podcast. This subject that we have all experienced in our own ways, and it's so incredibly nuanced and big and a huge part of the human experience. And it's going to be a big episode today. And we have an amazing guest today.
We have not only an amazing guest, our very first guest on the show, which is incredible. So this woman, I was lucky enough to work on the show Special Forces with. She was on. I'd never met her before. We met for the first time there, and we've really gotten to know each other, and we've become really good friends. She's just an incredible woman, and I'm super excited and proud and honored to introduce our very first guest on Oldish. Kelly Rizzo is here.
Hi,
Hey,
Kelly.
she made it.
Yay! Of course I made it. I'd miss this.
How are you?
I'm good. Does this look familiar, guys?
It does look familiar. Yeah, we were just there the other day watching episode 2 of Special Forces, sitting in that room.
Watch party.
Yeah, it was so cool to watch. By the way, that pizza that you had there is unreal. Where was that from again?
That was Prince Street Pizza, which
I've
is
never had that before.
Very popular in New York and has now just come to LA. So we get to experience good. It's actually like Sicilian style pizza, but you know.
I was all about that. That was awesome.
So delicious. Kelly, this is Randy. Randy is on with us. Randy, Kelly.
Hey, Kelly.
Hi, Randy. Nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too.
Kelly
Welcome.
recently got a chance to meet Sharna because, like she was saying, we went over to her house for a viewing party.
Super fun.
Sharna, you are just such an angel. I'm so happy we finally met. So thank you guys for coming over.
Too. It was. Thank you for having us. I adore you. He always spoke so highly of you, so I knew I couldn't wait to meet you. And you're wonderful. So I love your vibe and your energy. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
As I said before, you are our first guest on this podcast.
Ever.
Yeah. So,
Wait,
pressure's on.
Yeah,
so
you are
kind of setting the bar of what we expect from our guests.
Well, all right. I'm gonna bring it.
I'm just kidding.
No pressure there.
Yeah,
Kelly.
no pressure at all. I'm
Kelly,
totally
I have a
kidding
quick
with
question for you though, before we get into our deep subject of today, because I've been watching Special Forces, and you're amazing, by the way. But what on earth made you want to do this show? What your madness, like Bri? What made you want to do Special Forces?
You know, I think we probably have like similar parallel reasons why. Like Brian, I know you had said because of everything you went through with your, you know, the physical and health trauma, you were like, I want to see what I can do now. And I want to see how strong I really am. And for me, that was a little bit more on the mental side of things, because I had been told over this past, year and a half plus since losing Bob that everyone's like, you're so strong, you're so strong. And of course, when you're going through it, you don't feel strong. You feel like you're a puddle or a pile of mush. Like you don't feel strong at all.
Yeah.
And then, but when enough people are telling you that and telling you that all the time, you're like, maybe there's something to this. Maybe I should put this to the test.
Yeah.
And also the physical side of things. Like I've always been, a little bit more athletic and on the stronger side for a girl. Like I could always do chin-ups and pull-ups and stuff. And I was like, I love G.I. Jane. And I'm like, I loved watching Sarah Connor do those, chin-ups and Terminator. I'm like, I need to experience this.
Yeah.
So that's why I did it. I think it was really seeing how far I could push myself and put this strength to the test.
Yeah, I was coming from very much the same place in what I'd been through. Really, I thought that it was an amazing opportunity to see what was still there and how everything worked and what I was capable of doing compared to sort of the the grim possibility that I'd gotten from some of like, hey, you may never be the person that you were before. And I think there's only certain ways of answering those questions. And I think Kelly and I really connected in the fact that our stories being incredibly different our reasons for being there were so incredibly similar.
Right. And I'll just add that, Brian, in the last episode where we are running down that dam, and I know you and JoJo's a photo finish, and I'm Sharna, I mean, seeing him do that, doing something that is so physically difficult and mentally terrifying as well. I'm sure, Brian, I'm sure you doing it, and Sharna, you watching that, were probably like
terrifying.
Well, yeah, but being like, wow, he really does have this back, because unless no one can do that and do it that well, unless you're truly in like peak physical condition, you know?
Totally.
Did you feel that right after you went through it, or was there a whole lot of self-talk going on while you were there?
I did a lot because I was there for 8 days before we started filming. I think I was there maybe the longest or second longest.
She worked at the resort. She was, cooking, and she was doing maintenance and things like that.
But we were pretty much confined to our hotel room. So I did a lot of deep diving on, warrior mindset YouTube videos, like these, positive affirmation YouTube videos. I was watching a lot of that stuff, listening to a lot of like Eye of the Tiger.
Totally get it.
Like,
I think that's
working
amazing.
out in my room and pretending I'm Rocky. And it was a lot of mental buildup before I got there. And then while I was there, especially that first day when we were abducted, and we had the burlap sacks over our head, and it was really terrifying. And there was a point where I was like, I'm on the verge where I could go into like an anxiety panic attack, or I could play Eye of the Tiger in my head and like think, and I was like, warrior mindset. And it calmed me down, and it got me to this place of like, I can do this.
That's amazing.
Is that something like a newly found skill because of the show, or is that something that you started diving into before? Because grief is the thing that we're talking about today, grieving. And it's incredibly hard, and people grieve in different ways, but then they tend to be so hard on others that don't grieve the same way they do. Instead of people realizing that, people grieve in their own way, and it's a full journey for someone to come through. And there's such differences between people going through stuff like that. And you, from day one, when we first met, you always had a very warrior mindset to me of like, I'm going to take the hand that's been dealt to me, and I'm going to make the absolute best of it, which I think that's something, it might've been learned for you. It wasn't learned for me, but it's definitely something now that I pay so much respect to, for people that live that way, because it's a difficult way to deal with things. Sometimes I would assume that it's a lot easier to just crawl under a rock somewhere and feel things on your own. And from what I've experienced of you, you haven't done that.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. I mean, it's, everyone's journey with grief is different, and it's very, I guess, until you've gone through it, it's really easy to judge other people, like, oh, they're doing this too quickly, or they're not doing enough of this. And, everyone's journey is very, very different. But I mean, in regards to this like warrior mindset, or the mindset I had like going into this show, I guess a lot of that came from my dad, maybe, because, he is a, Sicilian immigrant, came here as a young child from Sicily, like not speaking any English, and worked his ass off his entire life to, build a better life for his family. And had it kind of rough as a kid. He was like a street fighter and always like had to, fend for himself. And ever since I was a kid, he always kind of instilled that in me. Like, I mean, this sounds a little, maybe not PC nowadays, but, as a young girl, he was like teaching me how to fight and how to defend myself.
I get that.
And, watching Schwarzenegger movies from the time I was like 6 years old.
Right. Yeah.
And so he was always like, you can do anything you want. It doesn't matter that you're a girl, like you stand up and fight for what you want, and never always having this like winner mindset versus like a victim mentality.
Yeah.
And, I think that was just always instilled in me. And then same thing with grief, going through this. It was always like his voice in my head, like, you're strong, you can do this, you've got this. Bad, like life is hard and can be hard and bad things happen, but you can't let that define you. And you can't let, you can't be, or, don't be a victim to this. Like you can come out the victor,
Wow.
and overcome this.
What an amazing mentality to have. Kelly, I can't imagine what your experience has been. And thank you for coming on here to share it with us, by the way. I know you lost Bob almost 2 years ago. What would you say I know you talked about your mentality here, but what would you say were some of the tools that you use to cope, especially in those early stages of grief where it is so incredibly complicated and layered and there's different stages of it? What do you find helped you the most in those early stages of dealing with your grief?
In the very early stages, for me, it was being surrounded by Bob people, as I called them. It was not comforting to me to be surrounded by even people who, let's say, best friends of mine, who maybe I had known for 30 years, but if they didn't know Bob really, or if Bob didn't know them,
Didn't mean anything.
Didn't feel comfortable.
Right.
But somebody who, let's say, had known Bob forever, even if I didn't really know them, I wanted to be around them. That's what gave me such intense comfort, was just being around these Bob people. So I really just surrounded myself with, his daughters, his best friends, his family, people who had known him for years, other comedians. I mean, I'd like to recommend to everybody to, if they lose a loved one, to surround themselves with comedians, because it really does help. Although that's maybe not easy for everyone to do. Although I was fortunate enough where that was very easy for me to do, because all of his best friends
lived with a comedian every single day. So that was your speed for sure. I mean, understandably surrounding yourself
and a comedian.
With people,
well, and the thing is that Bob was such a grief professional. He was such a pro at it because he had lost so many people in his life. Both his parents, both his sisters, so many people he had lost, his best friends. And he would always tell me, like, don't worry, when this happens to you, like one day, like when you lose your parents, like, I'll be there for you because I'm the pro and I know what to do and I will help you through this. And so that was really a massive gut punch too, where I was like, he was my guy that was supposed to help me through all this stuff, And so to not have him when I was going through, it was so weird. So I was just trying also to kind of tap into what I thought he would be saying to me.
Right.
But yeah, the early stages was really surrounding myself with people who were closest to him. And then really soon after that, the biggest thing that helped me was just gratitude. It was 100% being grateful for the time that I had versus feeling slighted or robbed of the time that I lost or didn't have.
That's
gratitude
powerful.
Is such a powerful thing. Yeah. Wow.
Hey everyone, it's Sophia Bush, host of the podcast Work in Progress. I am thrilled to tell you that Work in Progress is back for a third season. My friends, it has never been more important than right now for us to have all of these big conversations. Together, we are going to get educated, a little bit enlightened, and we will definitely be entertained. I started Work in Progress because I'm a curious person, and I realized there are so many people I get to speak to that are fascinating and rare. And so I thought, why not take these conversations out into the world I'm going to be having deep chats with thought leaders, newsmakers, celebrities, entertainers, authors, elected officials, and more. You can join us and listen to Work in Progress on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Kelly, I have a question, and just to sort of honor Bob here as well. For those, I'm sure so many people know who you're talking about, but for those listeners who don't know or are new to this podcast or are new to you, can you tell us a little bit? I mean, just take us back a little bit and talk about who Bob was, what your relationship was, and just give us a little bit of the story.
So, in case we didn't say it was Bob Saget, I mean,
I don't think we did, actually.
Okay.
We should have said that, yeah.
Yeah. And so, it's so funny because Bob was such a dichotomy. And for people who, I'm sure all of you, especially Brian, I know like you'd met Bob before, right?
I met him briefly. I didn't know. I didn't
Randy, did you know
him?
I had a dinner with him back when I was 21 or 2. We had 1 or 2 dinners, so I knew him a little bit.
Well, a dinner with Bob is enough of an experience to really get Bob.
Yes.
And, he was this interesting mix of Danny Tanner and his stand-up and the guy from Entourage. Like, he was this perfect mix because he really did like to hug people in clean like Danny Tanner did, but he also was, had a raunchy side to him and, was very biting and quick-witted and, nobody was quicker and wittier and came up with the craziest stuff off the top of their head than Bob.
That surprised me actually when I had dinner with him, because I grew up watching Full House and I knew of him, and then to actually sit down and hang out and talk with him, I was surprised at the different sides of him because I saw all of those.
Yeah. He wore his heart on his sleeve like no other. He was so complex and so brilliantly just funny, but also so deep and introspective and so sensitive. I mean, I would say things to him like, I would say something like, honey, could you just turn the light off real quick? And he'd be like, you're being mean to me. You're being so mean. I'm like, what? I didn't even say any, what? And he's like
me.
He's like, you, right. Yeah. I'm like, I literally could not have even said that more neutrally. And he would be like, so like, oh, you don't stop yelling at me. I'm like, what? I didn't stop telling me. I just asked you to turn the light off. What? Anyway, so he was so sensitive and so deep and existential and he felt like the pain of the world so deeply. You'd watch the news and get so upset and personally upset about it. I'm like, maybe you shouldn't watch the news,
Right.
And he would just take everything.
How did you guys first meet?
So, okay. The real story, the story we would tell people is that he found me on Instagram.
Real story.
Okay.
The real story is that he saw me on Raya on the dating app, but then went to Instagram then asked a mutual friend or somebody he assumed would be a mutual friend because I was living in Chicago at the time. And so he asked a mutual Chicago radio host, media personality, hey, do you know Kelly Rizzo? And he's like, yeah. And Bob goes, is she a bitch? And he's like, no, I hear she's really nice. And he goes, I want to send her a message on Instagram. Could you let her know I'm messaging her? And he's like, all right. So he got this message to me, like, Bob Saget's going to reach out to you on Instagram. And I was like, ugh. Why? I was just so not interested at first. I was like, he's too old for me, not really my type. But then we kind of
would it have been better on the dating site versus Instagram?
Probably not, because I think he even got Raya somehow to change his age from like 59 to 50.
Oh my gosh.
And so he, he was lying on the dating site, but
everybody lies on dating sites,
right?
And about something.
Exactly. So we became Snapchat friends at first. His username is Bobsterclaw. And
I love it.
And then we just started talking for a while, and then we hung out in LA, and I was like, damn it, he's wonderful. I was like, I can't have a crush on Bob Saget. Like, that's too weird. But then I just, let my guard down and I was like, all right, this is the most unique human that's literally ever lived. I can't pass this up and I should just go with it.
Wow, that's amazing.
Now he had kids, right? He already had daughters.
And his joke is, I have 3 daughters, DJ, Steph, Michelle. No, he does have 3 daughters, Aubrey, Laura, and Jenny. And they are in their 30s. So, when I met him, they were all in their 20s. And it was a great situation because from the get-go, I became so close with them and they were wonderful. And I was like, wait, this is so great. I get to have daughters, but I didn't have to like change any diapers. I just get to drink martinis with them.
Right.
You went straight
they can all
to that
legally
stage.
drink. I make a great martini.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Make a great cocktail. I will say that.
Oh, thank you.
Wow, what a cool story that you met the human and you just got to know him, and that's so beautiful. Because not that we're talking about dating sites, but dating sites are so crazy and meeting people is really hard. And we take a lot of things at face value and make these opinions on people. But sometimes giving a chance is really, really cool too. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
The old fashioned way on social media is how we met.
Yeah. Oh my God. Is that the old fashioned way now?
It will be soon. People will be like, "Oh, you met on Raya? Oh, I remember Raya."
Well, I went.
I had a pager and a fax machine.
I love that you gave us the real story.
Yeah. Right. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember I think it was on the Tonight Show or something. He told a story. He's like, yeah, we met on Instagram. And I was like, you liar. That's not how we met.
That is not the story.
You were not 50.
Yeah. You were not 50.
We did
you were
not
59.
meet on Instagram.
Yeah.
How long did you both have together before he passed?
We were together almost 6 years, but married almost 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so like 3.5 years married.
So you were together for 6 years, married for almost 4, you said?
Yeah, this month, October, would have been our 5-year anniversary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Were there any health issues or anything leading up to his passing that you guys had dealt with before and that concerned you at all?
No, I mean, he was always super healthy overall. I mean, I was always kind of getting on him about just like eating healthier and, like trying to always make him healthy food, and he'd still want to eat ice cream at night, stuff like that.
Of course, because it's delicious.
Because, he was 65 at the time, and I was, just really trying to get him to be as healthy as possible. Right. But I mean, in terms of, his overall health, it was great. And he was, he was always just describing himself as, he's like, I'm a bull, because he was so strong. And he did have this like almost superhuman strength where he was way stronger than you thought Bob would be, because, you looked at him as this like kind of tall, skinny guy.
Right.
But he just was so strong and such a bull in so many ways. And always very healthy. So leading up to everything, that's why it was so shocking, because for the first few weeks, we didn't know what had happened. We just assumed that it was a heart attack or a stroke or something, in which case I was like, oh, why didn't he, I wish we would have taken better care of him, like right leading up to it. But then it's like, we found out that it was just this freak, horrible accident that was, completely unforeseeable, just as all accidents are,
Right. Do you feel like before you got those answers, you went through that stage of grief of there's a little bit of guilt involved somewhere? Like, I could have done more, or we could have gone to doctors, or we could have. I find that grief, again, is different for everyone. But in my experience with it, I had this little stage of like guilt of the things that I could have done differently to help prevent, like there's something I could have done to stop the universe from making this decision or this happening. Did you go through that at all?
A little bit. However, it was a little bit more at the time. And once, I don't even think I've ever told anybody this before, but like at the time, it was just for those couple weeks, it was almost a little bit more anger because
Mhm.
I had always been saying, you, you need a checkup, like go to the doctor. And, he was so busy and he wasn't like fighting me on it, but he just didn't really get around to it. And I was like, ugh, like, why didn't he go to the doctor? Why? So it was almost like a little bit of anger on my part, like towards him, which I felt guilty about being angry
Ooh,
at
Kelly, I
him.
relate to you so much right now. My dad passed a couple of years ago, and there's a whole lot in that story. We didn't have an amazing relationship, but he came over to visit in the States and had told me he'd been fully cleared by his doctors and everybody he could travel. And once he got here, I realized that he was definitely not well. And all things leading up to it, he ended up passing while he was here visiting.
Oh
And
my God, Sharna.
I
From
went through
COVID.
my first step. Well, COVID that led
It was
to
right.
he had
It was
all
a
sorts of
byproduct. Right.
complications.
Yeah.
So
His
COVID like
kidneys
was
and
a
everything was
catalyst.
failing.
Yeah.
Yes, and in the hindsight, I think that he somehow felt like this was his last chance to see me, and so he made it happen. But in not having had a great relationship with him, my initial reaction, even while he was in hospital, was anger at him. And when he passed, anger at him because I was the one that was going to have to deal with this and pick up the pieces for a man that I did not have a good relationship with at all. Um, Deep anger and then guilt for not crying and then guilt for not for being angry. It took quite a while for me to get past that stage. It was so bad for me that when Zane was finally born, because I was only 3 months pregnant when my dad passed, and people would say that Zane looked like him, I would be so against it and so upset. And then I'd look at Zane trying to convince myself that there's none of my dad in him. And it took me a long time. And obviously you have a different experience. Your anger didn't last that long. But I feel you on that, feeling anger towards someone and then passing, and then that complicated feeling of guilt for feeling angry. It's just shitty. But I do
Yeah.
think it's also a normal, natural stage of grief, I feel like. But it's tough, man. I feel you on that one.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. That's really heavy that like your last visit was this, dark, horrible time. And in one sense, it's like, wow, you did get to see him before. So
Totally.
that's
Yeah.
that's wonderful. And I'm sure in hindsight, you're able to look back and be grateful that you had that last time.
Yep.
But then at the same time, you're like, then you're like, oh, it happened on my watch,
Yes,
and
all of that. And
yeah.
like you, gratitude was the number one thing. Once I found that space of being able to find just a little bit of gratitude and then more and more each day, the biggest part of my healing journey with my dad and his time here and that last visit and he met Bri and knowing that I'm pregnant and all these different things, regardless of the issues we had in our relationship, I found deep gratitude that we could have those moments. And oddly, in his passing, I talk to him all the time now. I actually have a better relationship with him now. I know that sounds weird, now than I did while he was still here. And I do thank him for so many of the beautiful moments that we did have in life, because there certainly were some of them. But gratitude was a huge tool for me in moving on with that grief.
Yeah.
From that grief. Yeah.
And I will also say that, once again, my anger, and it wasn't severe because, I was like, once again, like you never know what's going to happen to you.
Totally.
But once we found out just a couple weeks later what actually happened, it made me feel, sorry, like so horrible that, like this amazing, wonderful, strong man just fell and hit his head and then he's like not here anymore. And then I felt so horrible, like thinking that I had, not blamed him, but put any of that anger towards him that, like, oh, I wish he would have gone to the doctor for,
Absolutely.
And when we found out what happened, I just felt so like so sad for him that like that after this incredible life that he led, that like that's how he went out. Like he just fell into his head, like something so senseless and so like that can happen to anybody at any time. It's just so weird that that's what ended up doing it, and but then we were also very grateful that at least when they did find him, like he was sleeping peacefully in bed. So at least it was like this, very peaceful situation. It wasn't this, because we think like, God, what if something awful had happened where it was like, he did have a heart attack and it was on stage or on something like dramatic. At least it's like he was found peacefully in his bed, and it was like, all right, we were grateful for that aspect, at least.
Of course.
All of that tiny little bit of anger that I had for just those couple weeks was immediately washed away. And then I was also very grateful for not having any guilt anymore. Like I was able to be so at peace with things because I didn't have any regrets. I didn't have any guilt. Our last conversation with each other that evening, right before he passed, like when he had gotten home from his show and he was, in his hotel room, was us saying, I love you so much. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Miss you. Can't wait to see you, honey. Like it was just love, 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 love. Yeah. No arguments, no fights, just happy love. Can't wait to see you. And, and I never had any regrets for how I treated him in our marriage. Like I know he loved me very much and I was a wonderful wife to him and he was a wonderful husband. So there was just never regret or guilt for anything. And it makes things so much easier.
Yeah.
When you don't have that.
Oh, that's such a gift.
So that was the other thing I was very grateful for being at peace with, our relationship and how we had treated each other and everything.
That's really beautiful. Is there anything in your grieving journey that, because I think for some people in trying to support people that are grieving, they don't really know what to do or how to approach it. Was there anything that you found other people did for you that was really helpful? I know it's probably different for everyone.
Yeah. And you're right. It is completely different for everybody because, for instance, how weird is it that, when you're grieving somebody that you also have to do it in the public eye? Like that's a very weird thing. And that not everybody has to go through. So like my journey is going to be different than almost everybody's journey because very few people have to, have everything they say, in People magazine or something like anything that I say about grief or anything that whatever happened with Bob, like everything's everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's a weird, different thing. So for me, people had to kind of navigate that as well. But for me, what really helped here, I'll tell you one specific story. The day Bob passed, some of his best friends came over immediately. It was, I think Candace was the first person to show up, and then John Stamos and his wife, Caitlin, and then Jody and Lori, and then Jeff Ross and John Mayer. So like those were like the core group that was at the house. And then a little bit later on, I had this friend that I didn't really know very well. And another friend, so her friend, who I also didn't know very well, just showed up at my door. And I was like, how did they even get my address? And I was kind of a little caught off guard at first because I was like, hi, like, what are you, I'm obviously a mess,
right?
Total wreck. And I was like, what are you guys doing here? And she goes, can you just point us to the kitchen? And they just went to the kitchen, just started washing dishes and taking out the garbage and like passing out water bottles to people and just like cleaning up.
I love that.
That's something I would never have thought to do because I would have been like, I'm intruding. I don't even really know these people very well.
Right.
But it was so helpful in retrospect to just kind of have the balls to just show up at somebody's house that you don't even know that well, just to help and be completely selfless. And that's something that going forward, I'm like, I would never have been open to anything like that. And it still might be a little hard to, like going out of your comfort zone, but that's something that I'm like, people need that. I would totally do that for somebody now.
Yes,
that's
just
incredible.
The basic things of everyday life become really hard. It's hard to function. It's hard to for a lot of people to clean, to cook, to market, to do all those things because it can just be so overwhelming to deal with the loss of somebody.
I think it is hard for people on the outside too sometimes to figure out how they can best help somebody in a situation like that. Like I know that I would be on such eggshells trying to figure out how to solve because that tends to be where my mind goes, is like, let me help fix the problem, and that's not a problem that can be fixed.
Right.
So it's confusing then, of like, oh, so now what do I do? Like, how can I be the best version of myself that I can be to help someone that I really care about through something that's hard, but I can't fix it. I can't. So I can only imagine that for people on the outside, they would be racking their brains trying to figure out what I can do. So that's an amazing one. I honestly,
that's an incredible one.
Such an active service kind of thing. And it seems really small when you're speaking about it. But God, that's huge. That's such a brilliant idea. I'm so glad that you shared that.
And want to know the one thing that most people would think is helpful, but wasn't helpful to me?
Yes.
And Sharna, like, I'd like to hear if it was the same for you, but to me, when somebody would just text me and say, "How are you doing?"
Oh, the worst.
To me, it felt like it was, I know they meant well and it was coming from a good place, but for me, it felt like homework. Like, I'm like,
right. I don't want to have to talk about this again.
Explain my feelings, and I have to put my feelings down and come up, and I don't want to send everybody the same generic response. I want to be genuine. So I'm going to have to come up with a genuine response to every person who asks me, like, well, today it felt like this. And whereas if somebody would text me like, what did you do today? Or what are you doing later today? That was easier for me because that was a specific thing. Like, oh, I went to the grocery store.
Right.
Versus having to explain how I was feeling and how I was doing. It always felt like an assignment. And I was like, really, you're giving me homework? You know?
Yeah. So the type of question mattered, how someone would ask it or what they would say. What about just a statement? If someone said, hey, I love you, I'm thinking about you. How did that land for you?
That was fine and welcomed. And like, I had this one friend who, once again, like, I wasn't super close with before, and she did meet Bob a couple times. But she was a friend of mine in Nashville, and she checked in with me and didn't ask questions, just every single day for, no joke, like 5 months. Every morning I'd get a text from her, like, I love you, praying for you, thinking of you, just letting you know, Bob, and would say something here and there, like, Bob is doing, or, something wonderful about Bob also, but just every day for like months and months, just, I love you.
Just the check-in. I think like what you were saying about the question is so right. It's no one wants to explain their feelings and relive it over and over again, rehash them. You're just trying to process everything yourself, and for some people survive it too. And that, how are you doing, especially in a text, it's just like you get a million of them.
Right. And it just felt like homework.
Yeah. Yes, it's such a good word for it. I have a friend that lost her dad a couple of years ago as well. And I would always make sure I said in the text, and I say this to people when they have a baby too, you do not need to reply to me. I'm just sending you lots of love. I hope you're feeling good. If there's anything I can do for you, please let me know. But I love what those friends did for you with just showing up, because even when people offer things, you find yourself in a space of not even knowing how to just accept it. It just feels almost overwhelming to say, yes, come over to my house, right? You feel like you've got to do something for that. But to have people just show up and do these things, it's like, I'm just going to do your dishes. I'm just going to mow your lawn. I'm just going to finish off your laundry for you, because they're the things that you don't want to do. And someone just showing up for you. I think that was really cool. Right. I love that idea. I have friends that did this for in a different setting, that they had a baby, and I got put on this email list of all their groups of friends that we took care of cleaning and food for the first month. Meals would get sent to their house, and people would go over once or twice a week to clean things up for them. And it was this beautiful community service in helping them into parenthood and all the crazy things, because they didn't have childcare or nannies or anything.
That's a great idea with the cleaning. I haven't heard that one before, but I will say that my stepdaughter's friends all got together and did like a fund of for like Postmates or something. Like they, you know, I don't know whether they all got together and put like $1,000 or whatever, but it was it got us takeout. Like they would just order us food, every night for the first like couple weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
And so at least, because that's one thing that you find is even just looking at your phone and opening Postmates. Oh my God, how overwhelming that was.
Mm-hmm.
It was just such an incredible mind fuck to be like, I can't even process like looking, like scrolling food items, like, like you couldn't scroll social media, you couldn't scroll anything.
Yeah.
And so it was overwhelming just to even order, Instacart or anything. So to have people do that for you is very, very helpful.
Oh, I so agree with that. That's beautiful.
Kelly, I'm curious because people grieve in so many different ways, like we've said. And there's grieving of a loved one, there's grieving of an animal, which we were talking about, Sharna, that just happened to your friend. It's grieving of a dream that has been lost or that feels unattainable. It's grieving of a child who might be moving out to go to college, sort of an empty nester.
Right.
What's the most surprising thing around grief for you? What really surprised you that you didn't know before?
That's a very good question. I don't know if I've been asked that question before.
I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah.
You're going to have to answer next, Sharna.
Oh, joy.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind was how incredible of a community can like pop up around you right away. And I was very fortunate and very blessed in so many ways to have such an incredible support system that, I mean, in my mind, I was like, oh, if I lose somebody, I'm sure it'll be, I'll have great support. But when this happened very specifically for me, and I'm sure the fact that it was Bob was also, a part of this. I just had the most incredible support system, and I was so lucky because I don't think that any inner strength that you have or that people say you have, like without all of that support, it just would probably have meant nothing. I could not have done this on my own 1,000%. I mean, first and foremost, we're Bob's daughters, and the fact that we just all had each other, even though we were all in the same place. Obviously it's different, a parent versus a spouse, but we were all just so gutted, like together at the same time, and really helped each other through it. And then both my sisters, both my parents were just so unbelievably helpful. So I'm once again very grateful and blessed that I had such an incredible support system that I didn't think beforehand that if I had gone through this, that it would have been as strong as it was. And then I think just the weird feelings that come along with it of, I had mentioned that I didn't have any guilt in terms of my relationship with Bob.
Right.
But months later, when you start feeling glimmers of happiness, you feel guilty for feeling happy.
Right.
So it's like this like survivor's guilt type thing that you hear about.
Right.
So that started creeping in a few months later. Like I remember one time there was a song playing in my house, and I remember I was walking around and I was just like I danced a little bit like in my house, and I was like, oh my God, should I not have done that? Like, was that bad? Oh my God, does this mean I don't love Bob? Oh my God, does this mean I'm not sad anymore? Wait. And then I started feeling like horrible. And I mean, this was like 4 or 5 months later. It wasn't like 2 weeks later. And I remember feeling so horrible that I'm like, how could I just have had a moment of levity? Aren't I just supposed to be sad forever? And then, so that was surprising to me too, like the process of going in and out of these waves of grief and then feeling happiness, but then feeling guilty for feeling the happiness.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's such a big one that so many people feel, this idea of how one should grieve.
That's the judgment of grief that I was talking about before.
So much judgment around grief, and we see it in movies, and we watch all these things of how people grieve, and then it's like if you're laughing even a day or two or a few weeks later Is there something wrong with you? Are you over it? Are you burying something that you shouldn't be burying? And it sounds to me as though everybody has their own process, and there will be waves, like you said. But when those times come where you are happy or you're dancing or smiling, I mean, what would you say to someone who has that moment where they've been sad, they were shocked, they could have gone through the stages of grief, of, disbelief, sort of the anger, the guilt, and then they get to this place where there's a glimmer of finding themselves again, finding a moment of happiness. What would you say to them?
I would say embrace it. Do not fight it. Hold on to it as long as you can, because that moment of happiness is surely going to be followed again by another wave of grief and sadness. So, knowing what I know now, I would say anytime you can feel happy, like just enjoy it, because this life is fleeting. This life is short. We're only here for so much time. We don't know how much. We could all be here for 5 more minutes. We could all be here for 70 more years. We don't know. So, I'm sure when Bob told me that night, "See you tomorrow, honey. Can't wait to see you," he surely did not think that, a few hours later, he was not going to be coming home.
Yeah.
So, we never, even if we're the ones grieving, we don't know how long we have. So if you're feeling happy, just go with it and enjoy it and embrace it, because, some hard life issues are right around the corner again.
So true.
So just being open then to just embracing the feelings that you have when you have them, and not worrying about the judgment from others while you're having them.
Yeah. And once again, like for me, just even in general, like everything, and even tying it back to special forces, I run kind of everything through the filter, or to get the blessing of, it's like Bob's daughters.
Yeah.
And my family, and maybe his closest friends. When it comes to doing something like that show, I ran it by Bob's Girls. Or when it comes to, moving forward, like saying like, one day am I open to meeting somebody new? Like I want the blessing of Bob's Girls. I want, like asking my family, like, is this an appropriate amount of time? Of course, it has to be right for you too. But you can't care about what everyone else in the world thinks. You cannot care about what, your neighbor down the street's going to think, if it's too soon or not too soon, or did you cry enough? You can't think about, oh, I made this life decision. What does, the other parents at the PTA think? You can't worry about that. You worry about the closest people to you in your life that you have to kind of answer to on a, physical and spiritual basis. Are you okay with this? And if we're all okay as a family and as a tight unit, then that's all that matters.
I understand that.
So speaking of okay and making decisions like that and moving on, I read somewhere just the other day that you said, I think it's time to move on, or I think I'm ready. Where are you in terms of dating?
Yeah, it's interesting because, as I said, in my mind, I had thought, it's something that doesn't cross your mind at all for a while. And then I was still not ready for a long time, but I remember thinking like, well, the year mark is where at least it seems like it would be appropriate. And once again, being in the public eye and having people.
Yeah, it's big.
You even read that means that, I said it somewhere, and now it's in the
and everyone's going to have an opinion on it. Yeah.
Right. Fortunately, there hasn't been anything, negative, or like, how could she even think about doing that so quickly? Because it hasn't. It's been almost 2 years now,
Yeah.
But I remember a little bit after the 1 year period, I had a talk with Bob's Girls, and I said, look, like I'm not really necessarily even ready just yet, but I'm just putting it out there that, it might be nice to maybe go on a hike or do this or do that with somebody. And they're like, Kelly, we just want you to be happy. He would want you to be happy. And I was like, really? Like, because I think Bob would be like, nah, I don't want you to be that happy.
You'd be happy, not that happy.
Right. But then, I have to separate what I consider what and I always say like what earthly Bob would have
Right.
said or
Who
joked
he was
about or
then
been like,
compared to who
how
he is now.
dare you? Like, you see, you don't love me, you know, like, but heavenly Bob would, of course, just want me to be happy. So,
Gosh, yes.
you know, when I got to a point where I was like, okay, heavenly Bob would want me to be happy. You know, his girls want me to be happy. You know, my family, my friends, like ultimately that's all that matters. And so, you know, you get to a point where you're like, okay, like my heart is ready for that. And also, it being somebody that would appreciate and understand and respect Bob in the situation. So, so yeah.
Big question, like to wonder when you're ready. I think, like you
Yeah.
said, well, I don't know if you said, but I'm assuming it would be so different for everyone.
Yeah, so different for everybody. Yeah, for me, it was something where after the 1 year period, I was like, okay, this is something that I could envision. And then it wasn't until a little bit more recently where I was like, okay, like I can actually, you know, see this
Entertain
happening
it.
versus
Yeah.
it just being a thought.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. I love what you said, the earthly and the heavenly version, because I always
Me
struggle on like,
too.
how do I explain that I have a better relationship with my dad now than I did when he was here, you know? But there is this heavenly version of him that doesn't have the hang-ups and his experiences from this lifetime. You know, there is the heavenly version that is, I think, incredibly happy and healed and whole and would only ever want joy in my life and those that he loved, and not feel any of the things that he felt while he was here. And I have a beautiful relationship with that person, the heavenly version of my dad. I love that you said that. That was great.
That's amazing. And it's so true, because there does come a point when you can kind of separate the person with, you know, that had the flaws and had the faults and I mean, we all do, of course. And then you envision them as this more like perfect, enlightened being that, you know, that's not, you know, in my mind, I'm like, oh, like I'm still worried about this and that. Like, would Bob be mad at me? And then it's like, you can envision him up there being like, come on, like there's bigger things to worry about. Like this is, you know, like this is silly stuff. Like in the scheme of the entire universe, like, come on, like this is not something you need to upset yourself with or worry about. And so you can kind of separate it as, you know, the two different beings.
I love that. Kelly, thank you so much for coming on, for being our first guest. Most importantly, just being open and vulnerable and sharing your experience. Because what we've found here and what we're doing is the more that we share from a raw and real place, the more that people can connect to that and it helps them. So thank you for being willing to share parts of your story and the real story.
The real meeting. Yeah.
Kelly, you're amazing. I thank you so much for being here. It was such an honor to have you on.
It really was, especially
thank you for just sharing.
So honored. I mean, all three of you, just such incredible, amazing people. And Randy, I know we haven't met yet, but I'm so happy to virtually meet you. And such an honor to be your first guest.
You were the first one that came
I'm giddy.
Yeah. It's again, just to echo Randy, thank you for sharing. And I have some beautiful takeaways from this as well, like things that I learned and that helped me sort of like put into a different perspective too. So thank you so much. I hope that the people listening can also connect to it and that it helps them in their healing journey with grief.
Grieving is a tough one. So I feel like the more we can hear from people and hear experiences and how you realize that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes you just have to be in it for a while. And even when it seems like things won't get any better, they will. And the more you can talk about them and you can realize that you're not alone in those experiences, I think the more it helps with the process. And you sharing today is just going to help. I can't imagine how many people.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That I can't even imagine how honored that would make me to help even one person. But, you know, as you said, this is a common human experience that every single one of us at one point or another is going to go through. And I had never really gone through it until losing Bob. And then it just happened to be losing somebody in such a big, massive way. But fortunately, it was also somebody who I truly made the world a better place. And that is, all I can ask for is in the gratitude of being like, wow, he made the world a better place. And all I want to do now is help, carry on his legacy in any way I can. So
yeah, well,
you're doing it.
He touched so many people, and now you are touching so many people with your experience of him. And
Bob would have had a joke there, but I'm not going to.
Oh yeah, I heard the joke. I think I heard him come down and tell me the joke about touching so many people.
We'll let Bob, I didn't tell that joke.
Shut up, Brian.
And on that amazing note, Kelly, I know you have to leave us. You have many things to do today, but we so appreciate you joining us right now, and we love you. Thank you,
I love you guys. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, bye.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Wow. Like you said, Sharna, so many takeaways from that.
Yeah.
I'll be processing that for a while. I'm sure the listeners got so much from that. And speaking of that, you're going to have questions. I know there will be a lot of questions flooding in about this. Bring your questions. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your experience. Grief is something that Kelly said we all go through. This is a human experience. Sharing this by understanding each other's process, because everyone's process is different. And I do believe that everyone's process is valid, even in the vast differences.
Oh, I agree with that. Definitely, Randy. I think that's a beautiful point. Everyone's process is valid.
Yeah. So bring your questions. You can call the hotline.
Brian.
855 oldish 3. I've got that one.
You've got that one.
Yeah.
And you can DM us at oldish pod. And again, please send in all the questions. And we also love talking to you guys, like we said earlier. So please, if you want to call in and actually chat to us, that's our favorite thing. So we would love to do that with you.
It's all Sharna and I were talking about it earlier. It's we so value human connection, and I think opening up those conversations and that line of dialogue is important, because it helps other people that are listening see it and see a possible different way of doing it than what they have been doing. And hopefully it works. I feel like in having those moments with people, it can open everyone up to new experiences and new thoughts. And so yeah, please, if you can, please reach out to us.
Or just share a story, any of those things. Wow, what an episode, you guys. We had our first guest today.
Yay.
That is super fun. I love it.
So great.
Well, good job, everyone.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah,
I know. We're all kind of like,
I know, right? Just taking it all in.
Yeah.
So please don't forget to subscribe.
Oh, yes.
And rate us and tell your friends, spread the word, because I was about to break out into the Justin Timberlake song. We're bringing connection back.
Randy, you showed up. I'm glad you did.
You know what's so crazy? My mind works like Zoe's playlist, whatever that show was.
Does it?
Someone says something and it sparks a song.
A song and a dance and choreography right away.
It's weird. It's strange. I'm sorry, but
Hey,
so we're bringing connection.
It's not weird
back.
And it's not strange. I think people each have their own way of enjoying life and making it beautiful. And the more we can share it, and the more you all can share it that listen, the better this experience could be. So thank you so much for joining us once again. Another thank you to Kelly Rizzo. She was a fantastic
phenomenal guest.
Yes. And she's just an amazing human being. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining, everybody.
And we'll be here again next week.
We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Yes, you guys are amazing. Make sure you guys go and follow us on Instagram at oldishpod. And you can also go and leave us a message at our own hotline, which is 855-OLDISH-3.
Make sure and write us a review. Leave us 5 stars if you loved it. Leave us 5 stars if you didn't.
We love 5 stars. We love 5 stars.
Yeah. Give us like 5 stars.
Yeah. See you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you next week, everyone.